again to ask the Chief Minister, but a slightly different subject. What options were considered before making the transfer of road transport licensing functions order 2019?
Chief Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr. President. A number of options were considered by a Council of Ministers review committee chaired by the Honourable Member for Council, Mr. Crookall, in July 2015. The committee made a number of findings following consultation, including that the Road Transport Licensing Committee, RTLC, should be merged into the Office of Fair Trading. The options detailed in the report were maintaining the status quo, merging the RTLC with the OFT, the Department of Infrastructure becoming the regulatory body, and local authorities undertaking certain RTLC functions. The report stated clearly that the preferred option was, at that time, merging the Isle of Man Office of Fair Trading with the Road Transport Licensing Committee. In addition to receiving the report, this Honourable Court resolved unanimously that the Department of Infrastructure take forward the steps suggested in the report. Mr. President, upon subsequent examination of this proposal, it is clear that as the RTLC was created by statute, as neither a department nor a statutory board, its functions cannot therefore be transferred so that it can be merged into the OFT. The measure proposed on the order paper this month, therefore, is to transfer the Department of Infrastructure's responsibilities concerning the RTLC to the Office of Fair Trading. Mr. President, we have listened to those voices that have raised concerns regarding the RTLC. Indeed, the Environment and Infrastructure Policy Review Committee is currently considering the matter, taking evidence and information from the taxi trade and Department of Infrastructure. This measure reduces the potential for a conflict of interest between the functions of the Department of Infrastructure and the Road Transport Licensing Committee, as the Department is currently responsible for making regulations that govern how the committee operates, but at the same time the Department has a large number of vehicles registered with the committee.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. It appears, therefore, that the options of moving it to a completely different department, such as Home Affairs, or indeed putting together a more widespread fused regulator, which was also considered a while ago, were not considered. Is that's still the case? And can the Chief Minister also confirm whether or not the RTLC have consulted and what their views on the matter are?
Chief Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. President, I would remind the Honourable Speaker that at the time he was a Minister for Home Affairs and voted in favour of this and would have been well aware of what was going through. I presume that the RTLC know the proposals. I know from the questions coming that not all of them are happy with it, but I'm sure they are well aware.
Supplementary, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. President. And can the Chief Minister confirm that in the programme for government there is the review of regulator and the fused regulator as an action, and that action is on the verge of completing, and in fact the Single Legal Entity Committee is about to receive that version 7 of that report. So the work to which the previous questioner referred has actually been ongoing for the last couple of years. Can the Chief Minister confirm that, please?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes.
Honourable Member Mr. Robert Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the Chief Minister accept that the report produced at the time by the Honourable Member for Council offering a range of recommendations that was, as he says, unanimously supported at the time, does he also recognise the fact that at that time the then Minister of DOI, by adding an amendment, recognised there was still further work to do?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm afraid the Honourable Member for Douglas East's memory is better than mine on that specific topic of the amendment made by the Minister, but I'm happy to accept his word if that was the case.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The Chief Minister, in his initial answer, did state that this would solve a lot of the conflicts of interest between the Department of Infrastructure and the RTLC. What analysis has been done in the preparation of this order in consideration of what conflicts of interest are created by the merger of the OFT and putting it within the Department of Environment, Food and Agriculture?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I see where the Honourable Speaker is coming from. This is not a utopian solution. He mentioned the Department for Home Affairs, but you have the police there who are responsible for traffic enforcement and etc. So is that an area where it should go? I don't think so. I think the committee who did their report, and as I say, it was voted on unanimously by Tynwald, made the recommendation, and I feel that I'm content with the recommendations.
Honourable Member for Onken, Mr Callister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Maybe I could help the Chief Minister, because the report in July 2015 made no recommendations. It just set out a certain path, and one of those was that the RTLC could potentially merge with the Office of Fair Trading. The Chief, to ask the question of the Chief Minister, it actually says under the report, the next steps, he said that very clearly there's further work to be undertaken regarding the future purpose, remit and operation of the Road Transport Licensing Committee. That is what the Environment and Infrastructure Policy Review Committee is currently looking at. So will the Chief Minister agree with me that we do need to look at the overall function of the RTLC, and maybe the motion later in the order paper is preempting something as a matter of urgency when it's not required?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. I accept the points made by the Honourable Member for Onken. However, I think this is the next step. The step he is talking about may well be the next phase, but I don't think this is putting the cart before the horse. I think this is a logical movement. There are a number of issues in the DOI that where they are conflicted by having the RTLC under their control, and this is a logical step to remove that. And should a report come out regarding the functions of the RTLC going forward in the future, well, that's what will happen in the future, but this is not interfering with that happening.
Mr Speaker.
Thank you. In the Chief Minister's rush to see my point of view, I think he may have neglected to answer the question, which was what assessment has been done of the present, the new conflicts of interest that will be created between the RTLC and the OFT and the Department of Environment, Food and Agriculture. Whilst you remove some from DOI, what assessment has been done of the conflicts of interest that are created by the move with OFT and DEFA?
Right, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. What I can say is, following the 2015 Tynwald resolution, the initial step was taken of an administrative merger in 2016 between DEFA, the OFT and the RTLC. The three bodies remain as separate legal entities, with staff moved into DEFA and co-located at the DEFA headquarters at St John's, generating at the time significant savings. As part of these changes, the sponsoring role of OFT transferred to DEFA, whilst the role of preparing the secondary legislation for and representing the interests of the RTLC in Council and in Tynwald remained with the Department of Infrastructure. I think I said in my answer to the Honourable Member that this is not a utopian solution, but we feel it is the better solution to the current situation.
I'm anxious at this stage we don't have a prolonged discussion on something that is later on in the order paper. Mr Robert Shaw.
Thank you, Mr President, and I acknowledge the point made by you, sir. Given that the Chief Minister has been kind enough to recognise the quite complex task that the Policy Review Committee has in studying this whole matter and coming back to this Honourable Court with its ideas and suggestions at a later date, and in light of the fact that he, and we all do, recognise the conflicts of interest that exist between the RTLC and DOI, and yet has not answered Mr Speaker's question about the degree of conflict that exists with OFT if such a transfer takes place. Why is he so determined to rush his fences at this stage when in fact all he's doing is jumping out of the fire in the way that he is? I just don't understand the mindset at all of the Council of Ministers on this.
Chief Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. We are carrying out the will of Tynwald, Mr President, from 4 years ago.
Rubbish.
It was a unanimous decision, which you voted on, the Honourable Member for Douglas East, and there was a consultation with the public in May 20... I have the floor, sir. And there was a consultation in May 2015 which received over 90 responses.
Honourable Member for Douglas South, Mr Beecroft.
Thank you, Mr President. I'd like to ask the Chief Minister, of all the options that were considered, could he confirm that they were all legal and lawful?
Chief Minister.
I'm trying to understand. I would have presumed they would be, Mr President. I don't think the Honourable Member is trying to say that we're going to go around doing illegal things in government. This was a committee report done in 2015 by the previous administration, which the Honourable Member voted in favour of. According to the records, it was unanimous. So I wouldn't have thought we'd be doing something that was illegal or unlawful.
Just as a point of order, Mr President, the Chief Minister does refer to the fact that members voted for a motion which is a different motion from what's being proposed.
Yeah.
You made your point, sir. Mr Harmer.
Thank you, Mr President. I just wanted to ask, does the Chief Minister agree with me that what has been proposed is not a merger of the OFT and Department of the RTLC, but in fact transferring the functions of the road transport at 2010, and that whilst the conflicts are real and present with the operations within the department, that actually the conflicts are not present because we're referring to policy.
After which I'll take two more supplementaries. There is to be a debate later on. No, two more only. Chief Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. Yes, I do agree.
Honourable Member for Council, Mrs Lord Brennan.
Thank you, Mr President. Does the Chief Minister recognise that what is in danger of happening is really substituting one set of conflicts for another? And notwithstanding the assessment of the situation in 2015, this is really focusing the mind further on actually what needs to happen next with the RTLC, and further actually how regulation is operated and the issues of that happening within government departments. Thank you.
Chief Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. Of course, a considerable amount of thought has gone into this, Mr President, on what is the best way forward, and this is considered to be better than the current situation. As I've said in an earlier answer to a supplementary, there may well be changes to the RLTC. That is the next phase, but this is a step, we believe, in the right direction, having taken advice.
Ms August Hanson.
Thank you, Mr President. Would the Chief Minister agree that evidence-based policy making with all stakeholders, particularly those working within the environments under discussion, is the best route to a successful solution? Is this perhaps a precipitous move? Thank you.
Chief Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. I would agree with the Honourable Member, which is why in May 2015 the then Department went out for consultation with the public to get their views, and 90 responses were received. And whilst there is a variant on the way this is going forward, as the Speaker has alluded to, it is still carrying out the recommendation of moving it out of DOI into now DEFRA through the OFT.
Final supplementary, Mr Callister.
Thank you so much, Mr President. I'm slightly confused on this because we've had now the DOI Minister and we've had the Chief Minister here. We're talking about the 2015 report. They talk about option 2, but there's no mention of merger. Will the Chief Minister confirm, because he's looking at option 2, and option 2 of that paper in 2015 clearly says option 2, merger with Office of Fair Trading. Am I correct or am I incorrect?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. I did read out in my answer, I hope the Honourable Member was listening, the reasons what was going to happen, and that's what I'll refer him to. As to what I said, upon subsequent examination of this proposal, it is clear that as the RTLC was created by statute, as neither a department nor a statutory board, its functions cannot therefore be transferred so that it can be merged into the OFT. And I went on to give an answer to him, so I'd refer him to the original answer he received.
Mr President, can I ask a point of order here? Because the Chief Minister...
Sorry, we're moving on.